Introduce and welcome Shankar Sharma. Yes, he is back from his holiday. Welcome back, Mr. Sharma. 3 months ago, you had predicted this decline.
Thank you.
Are you feeling very happy about your call?
There's no feeling happy or sad in the stock market, or for that matter in cricket, because you will win some, you will lose some. Hopefully over a period of time you should win more than you lose, but you will lose a few as well. So the one thing that sports and markets both teach you is that always remain humble and remain rooted to the ground. So yeah, it has worked out. I'm not very happy at the way it has worked out, particularly for our local markets. Globally, it was anyway looking very shaky. But be that as it may, anybody who was careful and conservative, 3 months back is probably a lot happier than somebody who was more aggressive.
So are we approaching a panic bottom, or this is just the beginning?
No, I don't think we are done at all with the fall globally, and within that context, I don't think we are done with the fall in India. When we spoke last time 3 months back, my view was that I think we were at about 18,500 or so on the Sensex back then, or thereabouts, give or take 500 points. My view was that we would see 16,000 at the bottom. And in markets you don't think that far out. I mean, you will make your view as newer levels come. We kind of very effortlessly reached the levels of 16,000 and that zone a lot more effortlessly than probably I also envisaged and visualized. But that having been reached, I don't see where is the redemption. I don't see what will change so dramatically. Even whilst I was away from the market, I did glance at the headlines, and I did glance at the earnings numbers, etc., and they did not seem at all enthusing. So without that, and then you have obviously the big global factors, the big overhang of those factors, and then you have our middle class going totally bananas over a movement which has absolutely complete disaster written all over it for the future of this nation. I think all things put together, I'm very sobered by all that I'm seeing around me.
And Shankar, what about growth concerns? Because it all seems like a growth collapse globally. How are you reading the environment right now? Several big agencies, every now and then we see them trimming US and Europe growth forecast. India has already seen its share of growth trimming.
Look, the US is into a long-term secular decline. I mean, I've spent many months there, even as recently as last week. And this has been a very long chunk of time in which I had a lot of time to do a lot of ground level analysis and what's happening there. And whatever I have seen is, in a very bizarre sort of way, it tells me that probably the US individual is poorer than most Indians, as we stand right now. Because you might have a nice house and you might have a nice car in the garage, but all that is backed by a ton of debt. So ultimately it doesn't belong to you, and shorn of the debt you have negative net worth. Whilst our poor, they live in slums, they don't have a car because nobody will give them that debt. So then who's rich and who's poor is a very involved discussion, and maybe you should have a show on that. That outwardly they look rich, outwardly we look poor, but net of debt, I'm not so sure. Consumer spending there, I think, is just going to keep declining. I think housing market will never ever come back. Whatever I have seen, I was in New York State and I saw every third house being up for sale. For $200,000, you can buy a 5-bedroom house with a 2-acre estate attached to it. I mean, it's absolutely, and still there are no buyers, by the way. And these houses have been on the market for a year, 6 months, 9 months. So I don't think the US can ever come back, in any meaningful way. You might have cyclical bumps on the way up, once in a while, but I think that whole trajectory is way down. I think they have outlived their sort of debt-laden ways. It is not going to come back. That's one. Europe, of course, we don't need to discuss much. Save for the fact that for whatever it is worth, the European nations, including Britain, I mean, they have at least talked about austerity, talked about talk of trimming deficits, talked about belt tightening. In the US, the A word, the austerity word, is a strict no-no. They still don't want to believe that the good times are over for good. They still want to believe that spending the way out of trouble is the only way out. and which I find absolutely insane financial advice. So that part of the world, I think, is a basket case. Come to closer home, ultimately emerging markets are not uncorrelated to those markets. We will be correlated. Even though emerging markets overall have done moderately okay relative to EMs, relative to DM, that's in large part because of the disaster in Europe. But without that, I don't think EMs can stand all on their own 2 feet, because we are still, in a global pool of equities. And then you draw it down closer to where we are within the context of India. I think looking at the numbers of earnings, I don't see any case for a big secular revival in the marketplace. That said, I'm not so bearish on economic growth. I think, whether it is 7.8 or 8.2 or 8 really doesn't matter much. The one core point that I believe in is that the real economy will grow a lot faster than the stock market will. And if you go back 3 years from the time the bear market started, that's pretty much what has happened. The real economy has compounded at nominal maybe 14 or 15%. The stock market is not even close to that. So that's really the essential disconnect, that the real economy will do well. I'm not so sure that will be automatically translatable into strong equity gains.
Shankar, but if the world is growing at about 1% or even sub 1%, and if Indian economy is growing at 7% plus, do you think whenever the dust settles down, Indian markets stroke EMs will emerge as eventual winners?
That there is no doubt about. I'm not saying that Indian markets won't emerge winners out of this entire rubble. If anything will emerge winners, I think it will be Indian markets, unless of course we see agitations of the kind that we are seeing right now intensifying and derailing a duly elected, constitutionally elected government and making a complete mockery of all due process of law and constitution. If that were to happen, then all bets are off. But if the middle class regains its senses and goes back to doing work instead of going and doing dharna in various places, I think we are very, very fine. There is no issue as far as growth is concerned. We can tinker around with 0.2%, 0.4%. But it is my firm belief that India as an economy will do very well. The stock markets need not do the same for a reasonable length of time. Like I told you, last 3 years it has not been correlated. I dare say for about a year or so at least, I don't see stock markets coming back. But project it out a little bit. I'm sure out of this entire thing, India will be amongst the best markets to be in, for sure.